me introduce to you our opening perspective speaker. This is my new best friend, Damien Noble Andrews. He's joining us from Colorado. Damien has many skills. He is and a great resume. He's always been a conversationalist and always been somebody who connects with other people, who listens and listens to learn and listens with empathy and listens with service. Damien, I'll let you take it from here and take it away.
Hello, everybody. Nalini, thank you so much for the introduction. I'm very happy to be part of all of this. And any way that we can come together and help one another, I think is a valid thing to be spending our time on these days for sure. I just get a quick thumbs up. My sound good? Everybody can hear me all right? Yep. Okay, great. So let's dive right in. Hi, everyone. My name is Damien Noble Andrews. This might surprise you, but I'm white. And yes, white people talk about diversity too. I know that I'm white. I know that I have a Y chromosome. The fact that I'm a white male in America these days means that I have it easier than other people do. I have privilege, but I didn't choose these things. I didn't choose to be white. I didn't choose to be a man. It was all given to me by my ancestors. Just like perspective, in large part, was given to us by our ancestors. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my grandparents, just for context. My grandfather is a first-generation American. He was raised in New Jersey by two Syrian immigrants. He used to load fruit into people's cars on the side of the road at my family's fruit stand. He grew up working hard. He grew up defending his plate of food because he was one of 10 kids. In fact, it was well into his 60s before he stopped putting an arm in front of his plate while we were eating. He moved to New York City. He became an actor. He was on Broadway. He met his wife. He had a couple kids, and then they moved to Los Angeles. And he was fortunate enough to be part of a show that featured a female and a Black man as lead roles on a TV show, which was not very common for 1968. My grandmother grew up in Iowa. She was an only child. Her parents ran a drugstore. My great-grandmother worked at the University of Iowa in the music department. And my great-grandfather taught there. He taught religion. He was a pastor. And to his congregation, he told them that the Bible was a wonderful book of stories that we should all learn from to be good humans, but not to be taken as fact. My grandmother grew up to be a dancer. She was a dancer on the Ed Sullivan Show. And while living in New York, she met my grandfather. They had a couple kids, moved to LA. We've covered that part. She went on to have 6 kids. My mom was the oldest of 6. My grandmother spent her school years teaching English as a second language, helping kids who had come into the school system down a few steps to get caught up, to thrive. She spent her summers in nature, road tripping around the country. She believed in God, and for her, being out in nature was her church. I was fortunate enough to be raised by a very progressive family, full of open minds, full of artists, taught to welcome in others and appreciate all of our differences. But not everybody was that lucky. I imagine that there's a number of you on this stage right now that weren't afforded the same luxury of open-mindedness and acceptance as I was. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles. My high school was 60 some odd percent Latino, 20 some odd percent Black, then Asian, then Persian, and then other, and then white. My graduating class had 586 kids in it. 6 were white. I was one of them. It wasn't until I spent a semester of school in Rockford, Illinois. Now, those of you who don't know, Rockford is the second largest city in Illinois, at least it was at the time, with a whopping 110,000 people. I walked into the cafeteria my first day at school, 10th grade, and I saw the largest concentrated group of white people I'd ever seen in my entire life. the entire room was filled with white people. I looked down to my right, and there was 5 Latino kids sitting at a table together in the corner. And there's probably 3 Asian kids scattered throughout the cafeteria. Now, keep in mind, this was a big high school. There was probably, I don't know, 800 people that I was looking at this time. And on the far opposite side of the cafeteria was a table with a table of about 20 Black kids. Now, I grew up as an athlete. I ran track, I played football, and I was often the only white kid on the team. So I walked over to the Black table and I sat down. Now, keep in mind, I'm brand new. It's a small town. Everybody knows each other. And I'm this new kid from California who just came in and sat down at the Black table. The record screeched. Everybody stopped. And clearly, the kid who ran the show at the Black table looked at me and said, "Can we help you?" I was scared. I was nervous. I was overwhelmed. So I took a deep breath and I said, "If it's all the same to you, that scares me and you feel like home. You mind if I sit here?" And they laughed, kind of gave me a little awkward perspective and said, "Yeah, sit down. You're fine." I grew up thinking diversity was the norm. And I was submerged into a surrounding where now I recognize that I was the majority. For the first time in my life, I was 15 years old. I was starting to piece together, the thought process that I had privilege because I was white. Now, I learned this because I was hearing how the other white kids would talk about the minority groups. And it was disgusting and it was appalling. And I would go over to friends that I had on the football team there, and I would listen to their dad talk over dinner. And the racial slurs thrown around were just commonplace. Again, not everyone grew up with an open-minded family. Not everyone grew up with the perspective that we are equal. Most of our grandparents were raised in an era, our grandparents, our parents, maybe even some of you today, grew up in an era where society portrayed white men as superior across the board. See, advertisements back in the day were very clear, right? Women were good for cooking our food and cleaning up, taking care of the kids, and looking pretty in a dress. And that's about it. Now, we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. You know, in preparation for this talk, I looked up a number of past advertisements. It was as recent as 1957 that a Black man was portrayed as a servant in a home in an advertisement. That is not a long time ago. Previous generations grew up with movies like Gone with the Wind, recognizing slavery as normal. But we have to think beyond what we've been taught. We have to think beyond the optics that have been presented to us. We have to think beyond the advertisement that tells us that, you know, a Black person is ignorant and is going to use poor language and be cast aside as a servant only. Again, 1957, this is not long ago. Our grandparents, our parents, maybe some of you grew up with family that bought into this perspective, that bought into the idea that when a person of color was walking down the street, they had to cross the street just so they didn't have to walk by each other. Grew up with family members that when they saw a person of color, they clutched their purse a little tighter. Or when a car full of people of color drove by, it was means for concern. I was 17 years old, freshman in college. And I was with my friends on the track team. See, for those that don't know, when you compete in a sport with somebody else, they become your brother. They're part of your family, without question. And I drew the short stick, and I was sitting in the middle of the back seat in a beat up old Cadillac driving through Fairfax and Los Angeles. We got pulled over. This is 1997. Not that long after the Rodney King riots, not long after things have been brought to a head. And the cop comes up. All of us have our hands up and ready, like we've been taught. And he looks, he asks for the license and registration, and then he peeks in the back seat and he sees me. And his face changes. And he asked me if I'm okay. He didn't talk to any of the other fellows in the car, three of which were black, one of which was Hispanic. And he asked if I was okay. And I said, yeah, yes, sir, I'm fine. And he said, it's okay. You can tell me the truth. The truth. The truth is I'm okay. He says, I need you to get out of the car, son. Now, I'm 17 years old. My heart's racing. Everything I've seen about the police means if you're getting out of the car, something bad's about to happen. I said, sir, I'd really like to stay in the car. And he said, it's okay, son. You're safe now. You can get out. And that's when I got confused, because for me, I was scared to leave the car. I was with my family in the car. But I get out. I stand there with my hands in plain sight because that's what I've been taught to do. And he tells me that I should go to his car and hop in because he knows that I've been abducted by these men and it's now okay. He thought that my brothers had kidnapped me because I was white and they were darker. My experiences, excuse me, my experiences have shaped my life, have shaped my perspective, just like they do for all of us. I grew up in the 1990s. I grew up as a minority in my surroundings. I grew up as the only white guy at the party most of the time. But some of you, some of our parents, some of our grandparents grew up in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And it was a different era then. They were taught different things. Now, the conversation has changed because now we're taught that we can't think that way. We shouldn't think that way. But let's dive into that a little further. Why? Why shouldn't we think that way? Well, because we know that we're dealing with another human being now, not just the color of somebody's skin. And yet, the more technology comes into the fray, we've forced our perspectives together. When Libya has explosions happen, we're all receiving it in our phones minutes later. We have the opportunity to learn from each other, to see each other, and to be connected to one another. But socially, we're not quite ready for that yet. Socially, we still want human connection. We don't want to receive everything through a screen like we're doing right now. We want to sit down at a coffee shop with people. We want to hug somebody. We want to have a conversation that doesn't involve being flooded with information from all over the world and all different perspectives. So what's happened? Our technology has outpaced our society. Our society needs connection. We need things to slow down. We need 3 tabs open in our brain instead of 47. Society tells us that we need to treat people as equals. Technology has shown us the diverse world that's out there. But our society has even outpaced our evolution, our DNA. See, when you look at the last couple hundred years in the grand scheme of things, from an evolutionary perspective, human beings have been around for thousands of years and all tribally based. we've recognized that if we see something different, that we're supposed to be wary of it. We're supposed to take notice. We're supposed to let the hair on the back of our neck stand up. We're supposed to stand up and protect ourselves in a stance. And that's normal, because a few thousand years ago, we were basically animals. And you need to protect yourself. You have very, very primal things that you need to accomplish in life. We didn't concern ourselves with being kind to another creature. We needed to know, was it trying to eat us, or were we trying to eat it, or was it just going to keep on walking? And that was it. So we grew up, we evolved as these tribes. And over time, we recognized that if something looked a little different, it didn't necessarily mean that it was bad. It just meant it was different. Now, fast forward a few thousand years, and over the past couple hundred, society has told us, disregard what your instincts are, disregard that feeling of something is different. In fact, not long ago, people were using phrases, myself included, that I don't see color. I see another human being. But we all know that's bullshit. Excuse me. We all know that's a lie. Because the truth is, we do see color. The truth is, we need to see color. We need to acknowledge it. We are now at a very unique stage in life where we're still connected closely to our DNA. We still have those feelings come up instinctually. And society has changed our perspective to understand that we are human beings and should be connected to another human being. And technology has brought us all together. No matter where in the world you are, we just saw the dots on the screen. No matter where in the world you are, you can come together and participate in this. But to disregard the fact that we're different is to do all of us a disservice. To disregard the fact that we are unique individuals takes us away from the beauty of what we are, which is human, which is special, which is every shade under the rainbow. And thank goodness for that. Thank goodness that we're evolving to a place where we get to have conversations like this, where people can come together and interact with the understanding that, you know what, we might not look like one another. But that doesn't mean we can't acknowledge that, accept it, and proceed with an open mind and an open perspective. My grandparents were raised by unique people. They evolved and developed into unique people. They taught me, they taught my parents, my mom, I should say. They taught my mom and they taught myself how to accept another person sitting there, how to have integrity, how to speak up when something was wrong. But not everybody speaks that language. And as we move forward with the conversation, as we move forward in our society with our ability to start a dialogue, we have to understand that not everybody has the same skill set that you do. Not everybody has shown up to be here today to engage with another person that doesn't look like them for the chance at learning a little bit, at becoming a little bit better, at an opportunity to impact the world in a positive way. As you proceed throughout the rest of these years, the rest of your years on Earth, and in my opinion, for the next 2 generations until things start to really become equal, understand that when you're speaking to somebody else that doesn't look like you, that didn't have your upbringing, they just speak a different language. But that doesn't mean you don't have commonality. That doesn't mean you don't have the opportunity to try and meet them where they're at. And if we all take a moment, the next time we're talking with somebody who doesn't look like us, who doesn't share our perspective, and we take our frustrations and our anger and our ego, and we put it on the side for a minute, and we look another human being in the eye, and we sit down and we say, where can we find common ground? Where can we meet? What can we agree upon? And if we start there, the opportunity for a conversation, for a dialogue, and for a 2-degree shift in perspective is much more attainable than if we approach life with, I need to shout the way I know, and you're going to shout the way you know, and therefore we're just going to keep yelling at each other. Please know that everyone up until 3-4 years ago, and maybe even today, and maybe even 20 years from now, has been taught that being divided is the right way. has been taught that when we're different, that's wrong. Let's make it as simple as possible. Let's take race out of the equation for a second. Let's only talk about sports, right? I'm a fan of a certain team, you're a fan of a different team. And we know that we agree upon this. I'm going to put my blue jersey on, you're going to put your red jersey on, and we're going to shout at each other. Why? Because that's what you do. Because somebody decided a while ago, if we get two different groups of people yelling at each other, we can sell more jerseys and we can make more money. So they've taught us to yell at each other instead of saying, hey, I like this team because they're in my city. You like that team. Let's enjoy a good game. We're taught that we need to scream and hate and be angry at each other. We're taught we need to pick Pepsi or Coke. We're taught it's Ford or Chevy. We're taught it's black or white. And that's all constructed so that somebody can make money by us yelling at each other and being divided. The true power that we hold is that we get to ignore that. We get to ignore the narrative that's been fed to us for generations, and we get to write our own. We have the opportunity to sit down with a person that is different, that disagrees with us, that has a different set of beliefs than us, and acknowledge that they are another human being sitting across the table from us that should be respected and heard. And if we start there, every single one of us has an opportunity to make this world a better place. Thank you very much.